Millionaire CEO never fell in love until he met the most unlikely intern who changed his life. An intern accidentally spills coffee on the coldest, most ruthless CEO in town. The next day, she's called into his office, expecting to be fired. But instead, he offers her a deal that could change her life forever. A crowded elevator. Elisa stumbles, coffee splashing across Ethan Pfizer's tailored suit. One mistake, one unexpected opportunity, and a millionaire CEO who never lets anyone in. Until now. Stay till the end, because this story is just beginning. Elisa Martin, a struggling intern, never expected her first day at Dax Corp to start with spilling coffee on its CEO. Ethan Pfizer, a millionaire known for his cold, ruthless reputation, she braces for the worst. But instead of firing her, Ethan offers her an opportunity, one that could change her career and her life. But working under Ethan is a battle. He's demanding, impossible to read, and keeps everyone at arm's length. Yet, something about Elisa unsettles him, her defiance, her determination, her ability to challenge him like no one else ever has. As tensions rise, so does an undeniable pull between them. But with office politics, power struggles, and Ethan's own walls standing in the way, can they risk everything for something neither of them saw coming? Some moments change everything, and some love stories defy all odds. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, I'm the narrator. Today, I bring you a millionaire love story. A love that rises above all challenges. Where hearts find each other in a world of luxury. True wealth isn't just money. It's love that lasts. Do you believe in destined love? If so, like, share, comment, and subscribe to Millionaire Love Stories for more heart-touching stories. Now, let's step into this story together. The first day that changed everything. Elisa Martin woke up feeling a mix of excitement and nerves buzzing through her veins. It was her first day at Dax Corp, one of the most prestigious companies in the city. She'd spent weeks prepping for this moment, polishing her resume, practicing answers to every interview question she could imagine, and even buying a whole new wardrobe that screamed professional instead of college student in sweats. But as her alarm blared and sunlight streamed through her apartment window, Elisa couldn't shake the sensation that something was going to go wrong. Her intuition wasn't far off. The morning began with her coffee machine refusing to cooperate. Instead of her usual strong, comforting brew, it sputtered out a pathetic drizzle that couldn't wake a hamster. Grabbing her coat and bag, she decided to pick up coffee on the way. But the nearest cafe had a line out the door. No time to wait, no big deal, she thought, clinging to optimism as she jogged to the bus stop. Except the bus didn't show up. Elisa stared at the empty street, willing the number 12 to appear. 5 minutes late, then 10, and still no bus. Panic began to set in. Dax Corp wasn't exactly known for tolerating tardiness, especially from interns. She checked her phone. Traffic was light. A cab would be quicker. Right? She flagged one down, told the driver the address, and sank into the seat, already rehearsing her introduction to her new supervisor. But the driver took the scenic route. I think we're going the wrong way. Elisa piped up after noticing a familiar park zip by for the second time. The driver mumbled something about road closures, leaving Elisa clutching her bag as she checked the time again. She was going to be late. No first impression is better than being late on day one, right? No pressure. When the cab finally screeched to a halt outside Dax Corp's gleaming headquarters, Elisa's heart sank further. The elegant glass facade loomed above her like a monolith, the kind of building where important decisions and billion-dollar deals were made. As she paid the driver, the toe of her left heel caught in the pavement grate. She tugged, her balance wobbling, her hair now a tangled mess thanks to the wind tunnel effect of the city streets. A passerby chuckled as Elisa gave her shoe one final yank and stumbled forward, nearly losing her bag in the process. She entered the lobby red-faced and out of breath. The pristine marble floors and modern art installations made her feel even more out of place. A smartly dressed receptionist smiled politely as Elisa sprinted toward the elevator, catching it just as the doors began to close. "Hold it," she called out, lunging forward. The man inside the elevator barely glanced up from his phone, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his expression one of mild annoyance. Elisa skidded to a stop, but her momentum carried her forward. and she accidentally stepped on his polished leather shoe. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she blurted, her face burning with embarrassment. He looked down at his scuffed shoe, then at her, one eyebrow raised. "It's fine," he said curtly, but his tone made it clear he didn't think it was fine at all. "I didn't mean to. Elisa started. But the man held up a hand. "Let's just pretend it didn't happen," he said before returning his attention to his phone. "Right, sure, pretend," Elisa muttered, staring at the floor and silently cursing her clumsiness. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. The air between them grew thick with awkward silence. And Elisa's attempts to appear composed only made her fidget more. When the elevator doors finally opened, she bolted out with a muttered apology, not daring to look back at the man whose morning she had clearly ruined. She didn't have time to dwell on the incident. Elisa headed straight for the receptionist on her assigned floor, who greeted her with a clipboard and a friendly smile. "Welcome, Ms. Martin. You're set to start in the project analysis department. The manager will see you shortly." Elisa nodded, clutching her bag like a lifeline. This was her chance to prove herself, to show everyone she belonged at Dax Corp. With one deep breath, she forced herself to focus. She may have stumbled, literally, into the building, but she wouldn't let that define her first day. As she waited for the manager, Elisa mentally repeated the advice her best friend had given her the night before: stay confident. Be yourself, and if all else fails, smile like you know what you're doing. So she smiled. She might have started the day as a walking disaster, but it wasn't over yet. Session 1. Into the corporate maze. Elisa Martin sat at her new desk, surrounded by the quiet hum of productivity that filled the project analysis department at Dax Corp. It wasn't the kind of desk she had imagined for her first day in a corporate setting. The smooth, dark surface gleamed with an almost intimidating perfection, and a sleek monitor sat in the middle, its blank screen reflecting her nervous expression. Around her, colleagues were already buried in their work, heads down, typing away, flipping through spreadsheets, and occasionally muttering something about projections and market analysis. No one seemed to notice the new intern who still hadn't figured out how to log into her computer. Elisa fidgeted with the hem of her blazer, trying to look like she belonged. She had a notebook and a pen at the ready, though she wasn't quite sure what to write yet. Her supervisor, Melissa, had handed her a slim stack of documents and a USB drive, muttering something about compiling data and presenting it in a clear format. Easy, right? Elisa glanced down at the papers, quickly realizing she had no idea what half the acronyms meant. Her eyes darted around the room. One man was poring over a spreadsheet that looked like an ancient manuscript, while another was in a quiet but intense phone call about profit margins and forecasting models. She turned her attention back to the papers in front of her, determined to figure it out on her own. But as the minutes ticked by, the acronyms and data points seemed to multiply like weeds, and her confidence began to falter. Just then, Melissa walked over, heels clicking against the polished floor. She was tall, sharply dressed, and radiated a no-nonsense energy that Elisa found both impressive and slightly terrifying. "Any questions so far?" Melissa asked, her tone brisk. Elisa hesitated, then forced a smile. "Not yet, just getting the lay of the land." "Good," Melissa said, glancing at the papers on Elisa's desk. "We need that report ready by the end of the day. And remember, clarity is key. No one wants to dig through a mess of numbers without context." "Got it," Elisa replied, her smile fixed in place. Melissa nodded and moved on, leaving Elisa alone with the growing sense that she was in way over her head. She stared at the USB drive, willing it to contain some kind of magical answer. Finally, she took a deep breath, plugged it into the computer, and opened the files. The screen filled with rows and columns of data, numbers and percentages that seemed to mock her. "Okay," she muttered to herself. "Time to show them what you're made of." She grabbed her notebook and started jotting down what she could decipher. Market trends, quarterly performance, projected growth, all words she recognized, though the specifics were still a bit blurry. She made a list of questions she could ask Melissa later, though she wasn't sure how many questions were too many for her first day. As she worked, her nerves slowly began to fade. She may not understand everything yet, but she knew how to research, how to stay organized, and how to present information clearly. She just needed time. and maybe a little caffeine. She glanced at the clock. It was almost lunchtime. As if on cue, her stomach rumbled, and she realized she hadn't eaten since that rushed cup of coffee before leaving the house. She pushed back her chair and stood, wondering where she should go. She hadn't yet met anyone on the team, and the thought of sitting alone in the cafeteria felt a little too much like high school. Elisa grabbed her bag and decided to head out for a walk instead. The fresh air would do her good, she thought. As she stepped outside, she was greeted by the bustling energy of downtown. People hurried past her, clutching coffee cups and briefcases, their conversations blending into the city's constant hum. She spotted a small cafe across the street and made her way over. The aroma of fresh pastries and brewed coffee greeted her as she stepped inside. Elisa ordered a sandwich and a latte, then found a seat by the window. She pulled out her notebook and began flipping through her notes, trying to make sense of the data she'd been assigned. She was so focused on her notes that she didn't notice someone approaching until a voice startled her. First day? Elisa looked up to see a man about her age standing next to her table. He had a friendly smile and was holding a to-go cup. Is it that obvious? She replied, half smiling. Not really. Just a lucky guess, he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down before she could protest. I'm Brandon, by the way. I work in marketing. Elisa, project analysis, she said, still feeling a little wary. Nice. That's a good department. I worked on a campaign with them last year. Brandon said, so, how's it going so far? Elisa hesitated. It's going. I'm still trying to get the hang of things. Yeah, it can be overwhelming at first. But don't worry, you'll get the hang of it, Brandon said. He took a sip of his coffee and leaned back. And if you ever need tips on navigating the place, just let me know. I'm practically a DAX Corp tour guide at this point. Thanks, I might take you up on that, Elisa said, feeling a bit more at ease. They chatted for a few more minutes, and Elisa found herself laughing at Brandon's stories about corporate mishaps and office politics. He had a way of making the whole intimidating world of DAX Corp feel a little less daunting. When lunch was over, Elisa returned to her desk feeling slightly more confident. She opened the files again, this time with a clearer head. By the time Melissa came by to check on her progress, Elisa had a draft report ready. Not bad, Melissa said, scanning the document. Keep refining it, and make sure you highlight those key takeaways. Elisa nodded, her chest swelling with a small sense of pride. She wasn't there yet, but she was starting to find her footing. The day continued with more challenges, but each small win gave her the motivation to keep going. As the office began to empty out in the evening, Elisa stayed behind, reviewing her work one last time. The city lights outside cast a warm glow on the desk, and for the first time that day, she let herself smile. She had survived her first session at DAX Corp, not perfectly, not without a few stumbles, but she had made it through. And that, she decided, was a good start. Session 2, breaking the ice. By the second week, Elisa had started to get into the rhythm of office life at DAX Corp. Each morning, she walked into the sleek, high-ceilinged building with just a little more confidence, knowing that at least she had managed not to spill coffee on any crucial documents that day, yet. She had also begun to recognize a few familiar faces in the project analysis department. Even if she didn't know all their names, there was Claire, who always seemed to be running late but still had time to offer a cheerful, good morning, as she passed. Then there was Sam, who was usually hunched over his computer, muttering about quarterly benchmarks and unrealistic projections. Elisa found his grumbling oddly comforting. It made her feel less alone in her confusion. Still, the office remained a maze of processes and jargon. Elisa had figured out how to log into the system and access most of the shared drives. But deciphering what to do with the files she found there was another matter entirely. Each day brought a new stack of reports or a fresh spreadsheet full of numbers that seemed to rearrange themselves into even more confusing patterns. Melissa, her supervisor, remained the stoic, ever-busy presence who handed out assignments with military precision. Elisa, Melissa said one afternoon as she dropped another folder onto Elisa's desk. We need a summary of these reports by Friday. Make sure you break down the data into clear bullet points. And remember, no typos. Yes, absolutely, Elisa replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. As soon as Melissa walked away, she opened the folder and scanned the contents. Pages upon pages of performance metrics stared back at her. Okay, she muttered under her breath. One step at a time. Elisa dove into the work with a determination that even she didn't expect. She Googled unfamiliar terms, cross-referenced data, and created color-coded charts to make sense of it all. She even asked Sam for a quick explanation of a particularly cryptic metric. To her surprise, he was more than happy to help. That's just the engagement index, Sam said, pointing to her screen. It's basically a weighted average of all the user interactions over a quarter. Higher means better, but the goal is consistency. Oh, Elisa said, nodding. That's actually pretty straightforward. Thanks, Sam. Sure, he replied with a small smile. If you need help with anything else, just let me know. By the end of the day, Elisa felt a small swell of pride. She had not only finished the summary, but she had also created a clear, concise presentation slide to accompany it. When Melissa came by to check on her progress, she even nodded in approval, a gesture that Elisa had quickly learned was as close to high praise as Melissa ever gave. You're catching on, Melissa said, flipping through the summary. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Elisa said, her cheeks warming with pride. As the week went on, Elisa started to notice other changes. Too, her coworkers were becoming less like strangers and more like people she could actually talk to. During lunch breaks, she would sometimes sit with Claire, who loved to swap funny office stories and give unsolicited fashion advice. You know, Claire said one day, gesturing toward Elisa's blazer, you've got that intern chic thing going on, but you could totally jazz it up with a statement necklace or something. Elisa laughed. I'll keep that in mind. What about you? You're always so put together. Years of practice, Claire replied. Also, retail therapy. Lots of it. In those moments, Elisa began to feel a sense of belonging that she hadn't expected to find. Even Sam's grumbling became endearing in a strange way, and she often found herself chuckling at his latest complaint. What now? She asked one afternoon, noticing the deep frown on his face. They're pushing up the deadlines for Q3 projections, Sam muttered, shaking his head. I'm going to need a miracle to get these numbers in order. Maybe we should start a wish list, Elisa said with a grin. Miracle for Sam, a coffee machine that never breaks down for Claire, and for me. I don't know, a day without tripping over my own feet. Sam cracked a smile. Sounds like a solid list. Beyond the budding camaraderie, Elisa was also gaining a clearer understanding of her role. She was learning to anticipate what Melissa wanted before she asked for it. And she was figuring out how to navigate the mountains of data without feeling completely overwhelmed. She even started adding her own insights to the summaries she prepared, small observations about trends or potential solutions that she thought might be helpful. To her surprise, Melissa started incorporating some of Elisa's ideas into the department's regular presentations. Nice work on that last summary, Melissa said one morning. The client appreciated the extra detail on the engagement index. Keep it up. Elisa's eyes widened. Oh, thank you. I'll make sure to do that again. It wasn't much, a single compliment, but to Elisa, it felt like she had just been handed a gold medal. For the first time since she started, she felt like she was truly contributing, not just trying to keep up. As the days turned into weeks, Elisa also noticed a subtle shift in the way people looked at her. The initial curiosity that had marked her first days in the office was starting to fade, replaced by something more akin to respect. She still had her fair share of embarrassing moments, like the time she accidentally walked into the wrong conference room or knocked over a stack of papers in front of a VP. But she always managed to recover with a self-deprecating joke and a determined smile. Only Elisa, Claire said with a laugh after one such incident, could turn a complete disaster into a stand-up routine. Hey, if you're going to mess up, Elisa replied, you might as well get a laugh out of it. By the end of her second month, Elisa was no longer just the new intern. She was Elisa, the one who could untangle the most confusing data sets, who could make even the grumpiest coworkers crack a smile, and who had somehow managed to keep her internship from turning into a total train wreck. She wasn't perfect, and she knew she still had a lot to learn, but she was finally starting to believe that she belonged at Dax Corp. And as she sat at her desk one evening, reviewing the latest round of reports, she found herself smiling. The corporate maze she had stumbled into no longer seemed so daunting. It was still a challenge, but it was one she felt ready to face. Session 3. A crash course in corporate chaos. By the time Elisa reached her third month at DAX Corp, she felt more confident navigating the everyday office routine. She knew which colleagues to ask for help, how to format her reports the way Melissa liked them, and which coffee machine on the second floor never ran out of creamer. But just when she thought she'd found her footing, a new challenge appeared, one that would test not only her skills but also her patience and creativity. It all started with a company-wide initiative, cheerfully titled, Operation Next Level Performance. The idea came from the executive team, who wanted each department to deliver a set of cutting-edge proposals by the end of the quarter. For the project analysis department, this meant a crash course in reviewing every major performance metric, highlighting key growth areas, and providing recommendations for improvement. It was essentially their usual workload on steroids, and the deadline was tight. Melissa gathered the team in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the bustling city below. Elisa found herself seated next to Claire, who was busy jotting notes with a pen that looked more like a fashion accessory than an office supply. "All right, everyone," Melissa began, folding her arms as her sharp gaze swept the room. "We have 6 weeks to produce a comprehensive strategy document that the executives will present at the quarterly review. I need each of you to focus on your assigned metrics, identify patterns, and come up with actionable insights. This is our chance to show the higher-ups that we're not just number crunchers, we're strategic thinkers." Elisa's stomach did a somersault. She could feel the weight of Melissa's words pressing down on her. This was not a drill. It was a chance to prove herself. But it was also a colossal amount of work. And as an intern, she wasn't sure how much input she was expected to contribute. Melissa continued handing out assignments. "Sam, you'll handle the user engagement indexes. Claire, you're on customer retention rates. Elisa," she paused, holding up a thick folder labeled Revenue Streams, before setting it in front of her. "You'll be analyzing our new product revenue growth. I want to know what's working, what's not, and why." Elisa stared at the folder. It was at least 2 inches thick, filled with spreadsheets, charts, and historical performance data. "Got it," she said, trying to sound calm even though her voice cracked just a little. Melissa's eyebrow twitched, but she said nothing. The meeting ended with a reminder that their first progress update was due in 2 weeks. And the group scattered to their respective desks. Once back at her workspace, Elisa flipped open the folder and took a deep breath. The data was overwhelming at first glance, endless rows of numbers, column headers she didn't fully understand, and footnotes referencing previous reports she'd never seen. But instead of panicking, she approached it the same way she had learned to approach every new challenge, one step at a time. She began by organizing the data into manageable sections. Using color-coded sticky notes, she divided the spreadsheets into smaller chunks: last quarter's revenue by product, regional sales comparisons, and year-over-year growth trends. It wasn't glamorous, but it helped her see the bigger picture. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. She noticed that some products performed exceptionally well in specific regions while others struggled. Certain promotions led to short-term spikes in revenue, but the long-term impact wasn't clear. It was like piecing together a puzzle. And for the first time, she actually enjoyed the process. After a few days of analyzing, Elisa started drafting her report. She didn't just list numbers, she added context. She explained why certain products saw higher growth in certain regions, highlighted promotional campaigns that didn't deliver as expected, and even suggested a few strategies to test in the future. She wasn't sure if anyone would take her recommendations seriously, but she figured it was better to offer ideas than to stay silent. 2 weeks later, the team met again to share their initial findings. Melissa, as usual, was all business. She went around the table, listening to each team member's presentation and asking pointed questions. When it was Elisa's turn, she stood up, clutching her printed report and slides. "Okay," she began, her voice a bit shaky. "I reviewed the revenue streams for our new products, and here's what I found." As she presented, she gained confidence. The color-coded charts she had made looked professional, and her explanations were clear. She pointed out trends, explained the logic behind her observations, and proposed a few actionable steps to improve revenue growth. When she finished, she glanced at Melissa, bracing herself for a tough critique. But to her surprise, Melissa nodded. Good work, Elisa. Your observations on regional performance are spot on. Let's include your recommendations in the next draft. Elisa could barely contain her excitement. Sure, absolutely, she replied, her grin almost too wide for the room. As the weeks passed, the project analysis department continued refining their strategy document. The closer they got to the final deadline, the more intense the workload became. Late nights at the office became the norm. Elisa found herself triple-checking calculations at midnight and fine-tuning slide decks that she hoped would impress even the most skeptical executives. But along with the pressure came a sense of camaraderie. The team bonded over shared struggles and long hours. Sam brought in snacks to keep everyone going, and Claire organized quick coffee runs. Even Melissa, who rarely showed her softer side, started cracking the occasional joke, though they were always dry and subtle. As if she were afraid of ruining her reputation as the stern supervisor. One evening, as Elisa was wrapping up her section of the final report, she caught Melissa staring at her from across the room. At first, she thought she was about to be scolded for some formatting error. But instead, Melissa walked over and gave a rare smile. You've come a long way since that first day, she said. I wasn't sure what to expect, but you've proven yourself. Elisa blinked, caught off guard. Wow. Thank you. That really means a lot. Don't let it go to your head, Melissa said with a smirk. We still have a few days to make this perfect. But keep it up. The words stuck with Elisa long after Melissa had walked away. She didn't just feel like the new intern anymore. She felt like a valued member of the team. By the time the final presentation was delivered, the entire department breathed a collective sigh of relief. The executives were impressed, and Melissa made a point of thanking the team for their hard work. Elisa even overheard one of the senior managers mention that the project analysis department had exceeded expectations. For Elisa, the experience was transformative. She had faced a massive challenge, learned how to navigate complex data, and proven herself to her colleagues. It was the first time she truly felt like she belonged at Dax Corp, not just as an intern, but as someone whose contributions mattered. And as she packed up her things after the final presentation, she couldn't help but smile. She had survived the crash course in corporate chaos and come out stronger on the other side. Session 4. Unveiling the numbers. After the success of her initial report on revenue streams, Elisa felt like she'd earned a bit of breathing room. But that calm didn't last long. Just as she was settling into a more manageable routine, Melissa called her into the conference room for another meeting, this one about forecasting and long-term growth projections. It turned out the executives weren't satisfied with just understanding the past. They wanted a clear picture of the future. And that meant predicting which revenue streams would keep growing and which might stall out. Elisa, Melissa began, setting a thick folder in front of her. I know you've already done a lot of work on the recent revenue data. But now we need to think ahead. The next step is creating a 5-year forecast. Elisa blinked at the stack of spreadsheets and market research summaries Melissa had handed her. A 5-year forecast, she repeated, as if saying it aloud would make it less intimidating. Melissa nodded. You'll need to factor in seasonal trends, market saturation points, and any upcoming product launches. Basically, you'll project where our revenue streams will be in the next few years. It's not easy, but I think you can handle it. Elisa felt her confidence falter. Predicting the future wasn't exactly her area of expertise. But she wasn't about to admit that in front of Melissa. Got it, she said instead. I'll get started on this right away. Back at her desk, Elisa opened the folder and stared at the data. It was even more overwhelming than the last batch. There were dozens of tabs, each filled with columns of figures that seemed to stretch into infinity. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had figured out the revenue data before. This was just the next challenge. To make sense of it all, Elisa began by creating a timeline of key milestones. She marked the launch dates of new products, identified periods of historically high sales, and noted when past marketing campaigns had the greatest impact. With this timeline as a guide, she started grouping data into logical segments: holiday spikes, regional performance trends, and product lifecycle stages. As the days went on, Elisa's cubicle became a visual representation of her thought process. Sticky notes covered her desk, her computer screen, and even the walls around her. She used different colors to track different trends. Pink for seasonal peaks, blue for steady growth products, and yellow for emerging markets. Her workspace looked like the control room of a particularly enthusiastic air traffic controller. One evening, as Elisa pored over the numbers, Ethan happened to pass by. He stopped in his tracks, eyeing the explosion of notes and charts surrounding her. "What is going on here?" he asked, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Elisa glanced up from her laptop. "I'm trying to see the big picture. It's a work in progress." He nodded slowly, his gaze shifting from the sticky notes to her computer screen. "And how's that going?" She sighed, pushing her hair back from her face. "Honestly, it's like trying to predict the weather 5 years from now. I'm connecting the dots, but there are a lot of dots." Ethan crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "You know, you don't have to get everything right. Forecasts are meant to guide strategy, not predict every detail." "That's easy for you to say," Elisa replied. "You're the CEO. If you make a mistake, people assume it's all part of the plan." He chuckled softly. "Trust me, no one assumes that, but I get your point. Just focus on the trends that matter most. Don't try to solve the entire puzzle at once." Elisa nodded, appreciating the unexpected encouragement. "Thanks, I'll keep that in mind." As Ethan walked away, she turned back to her spreadsheets with a renewed sense of purpose. Instead of trying to forecast every single number, she focused on the major patterns and trends. She identified which products consistently outperformed their competitors, which regions had the most growth potential, and which seasonal events had the biggest impact on sales. She used these insights to build a simpler, more streamlined forecast. Over the next week, Elisa refined her projections. She cross-checked her assumptions with industry reports and historical data. She asked for input from colleagues who had worked on similar forecasts in the past. Slowly but surely, she started to see a clearer picture emerge. By the time Melissa called the team together for a status update, Elisa was ready to present her findings. "All right, Elisa," Melissa said, gesturing for her to start. "Let's hear it." Elisa stood up and plugged her laptop into the conference room screen. Her first slide showed a simple graph with 3 distinct lines, one for steady growth products, one for seasonal products, and one for emerging markets. "This is where I think we're headed," Elisa began. "Steady growth products will continue to provide a strong foundation. Seasonal products will bring in surges of revenue at key times of the year. And emerging markets have the potential to significantly boost overall growth." She clicked through her slides, explaining her reasoning step by step. She showed how she'd accounted for market saturation, how she'd factored in the impact of upcoming product launches, and how she'd adjusted for potential economic shifts. By the end of her presentation, she felt confident in her projections, even if they weren't perfect. When she finished, there was a brief silence. Melissa reviewed the graphs on the screen, her face unreadable. Elisa felt her palms start to sweat, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Well done," Melissa finally said. "This is exactly the level of detail I was looking for. Keep refining the numbers, but your approach is solid." Elisa exhaled, relieved. "Thank you, I'll keep working on it." As the meeting ended, her colleagues offered words of encouragement. Even Sam, who was usually more reserved, said, "Nice job, Elisa. I like the way you broke it all down." Back at her desk, Elisa felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't expected. For the first time, she realized she could handle the pressure and deliver results that mattered. She still had a lot to learn, but she was starting to feel like she belonged at Dax Corp, not just as an intern, but as someone who could make a real contribution. Over the next few weeks, Elisa continued refining her forecast. She worked closely with Melissa and the rest of the team, adding more detail and adjusting her projections based on new data. The final document was a comprehensive, well-organized plan that highlighted the most promising revenue streams and outlined clear strategies for growth. When the day came to present the final forecast to the executives, Elisa was nervous, but also proud. She had taken on a project she never thought she could handle, and she had proven herself in the process. As she stood in the executive boardroom, ready to share her findings, she realized just how far she'd come since that first chaotic day at Dax Corp. The meeting went smoothly, and the executives were impressed. Melissa made a point of acknowledging Elisa's contributions, and even Ethan gave her a nod of approval. After the meeting, Melissa pulled Elisa aside. "You've done great work," she said. "I knew you had potential, but you've exceeded my expectations. Keep it up. Elisa beamed, feeling more confident than ever. She knew she still had a lot to learn, but for now, she was proud of what she had accomplished. The 5-year forecast had been a daunting challenge, but it had also been a turning point. Elisa had not only survived the corporate chaos, she had thrived in it. Session 5, The Unexpected Opportunity. After the long hours spent refining her 5-year forecast, Elisa thought she could finally take a breath. Her team's leadership had been pleased with her projections, and she was starting to feel like she might actually have a handle on the chaos. But just as she was about to settle back into her routine, an unexpected email landed in her inbox. Subject: Project Development Committee Meeting. Time: 9:30 a.m. Tomorrow. Location: Executive Conference Room 1. Participants: Senior Management, Ethan Pfizer, Elisa Martin. Elisa blinked at her screen. Why on earth was she listed on a meeting with senior management? She was still just an intern. The idea of being included in the same sentence as Ethan Pfizer made her stomach flip. She rushed to Melissa's desk to find out what was going on. Melissa looked up from her laptop with her signature calm expression. What's up? I just got an invite to the project development meeting tomorrow. Is that a mistake? Elisa asked, holding out her phone as if showing it would somehow clear things up. Melissa scanned the email and raised an eyebrow. No, that's correct. Correct? Elisa's voice rose an octave. I'm not even full-time staff yet. Melissa shrugged. Ethan requested that you attend. He wants you to present your projections and discuss how they might influence the new expansion project. Elisa felt her pulse quicken. Present? In front of senior management? Yes, Melissa said simply. You've done the research. Now it's time to show them what you've got. Elisa didn't sleep much that night. She kept going over her presentation slides, tweaking the graphs, and rehearsing what she would say. By the time her alarm went off, she was running on pure adrenaline. She arrived at the office early, dressed in her best business outfit, clutching a stack of notes and her laptop. When she stepped into the executive conference room, she was met with a sea of sharply dressed senior managers. They were sipping coffee, reviewing documents, and chatting in hushed tones. In the middle of it all was Ethan, standing with his arms crossed, scanning the room like a hawk. His expression was as unreadable as ever. Elisa sat at the end of the table, feeling entirely out of place. Melissa had given her a small pep talk that morning, but now that she was here, she wondered if this was all a big mistake. The meeting started, and for the first half hour, she mostly listened. The senior managers discussed timelines, budgets, and market trends, using acronyms and jargon that made her head spin. She kept her hands under the table so no one could see them shaking. Then Ethan turned his gaze toward her. Elisa, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. You've put together a detailed forecast. Walk us through your findings. She froze for a split second before nodding. Yes, of course. She connected her laptop to the projector, and her slides appeared on the screen. With one final deep breath, she began. At first, her voice was shaky. She explained how she had broken down the revenue streams into key categories, identified growth trends, and factored in seasonal fluctuations. She clicked through her graphs, showing how steady growth products provided a foundation, while seasonal spikes could be better leveraged with targeted marketing. The emerging markets, she explained, offered untapped potential but required careful resource allocation to avoid overextending the company's reach. As she went on, her confidence grew. She looked up from her notes more often, made eye contact with the room, and even managed to crack a small joke about the sadness chart she'd used as a placeholder name for one of the graphs early on. By the time she reached her conclusions, the room was quiet. The senior managers were leaning forward in their chairs, actually paying attention. Even Ethan had uncrossed his arms and was nodding slightly. When she finished, she looked around the table. Any questions? She asked, hoping she sounded more professional than terrified. One of the managers leaned forward. Your projections are thorough, but how confident are you in the emerging markets? The risks seem significant. Elisa straightened up, recalling the research she had pored over for days. I understand the concerns. While the risks are real, I believe they can be mitigated with incremental investments rather than an all-at-once approach. We can enter these markets cautiously, test our assumptions, and scale up only if the results meet expectations. The manager nodded thoughtfully. And another one chimed in. What about the seasonal spikes? Can we ensure our supply chain can handle the increased demand? Elisa nodded. That's something I've considered. My forecast assumes that we maintain current supply chain capacity. But we should also explore partnerships with third-party logistics providers during peak seasons. This would give us flexibility without committing to permanent infrastructure costs. The questions kept coming, but Elisa handled them as best she could. By the end of the Q&A session, she felt like she had just run a marathon. But she was still standing. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Well done, Elisa, he said. Your analysis provides a solid foundation for the next phase of this project. Her heart skipped a beat. Ethan Pfizer, the man who rarely gave out compliments, had just acknowledged her work in front of the entire senior management team. As the meeting wrapped up, Melissa caught Elisa in the hallway. Great job in there, she said. You were clear, concise, and confident. That's not easy in front of that group. Elisa smiled, finally allowing herself to feel proud. Thanks, I was so nervous. I thought I might trip over my own words. Well, you didn't, Melissa replied, and now they know you're capable of more than just running numbers. Keep this up, and who knows what opportunities will come your way. For the rest of the day, Elisa walked around the office with a slight spring in her step. She knew she still had a long way to go, but today was proof that she could hold her own in a room full of experts. She had taken a chance, faced her fears, and come out stronger on the other side. Later that evening, as she reviewed her notes one last time, she realized something important. It wasn't just about impressing Ethan or the senior management team. It was about proving to herself that she belonged here, that she could thrive under pressure and make a real impact. And in that moment, Elisa knew she wasn't just an intern anymore. She was on her way to becoming a trusted member of the team. Session 6. A storm brews. The buzz around Elisa's growing reputation as a skilled analyst had been impossible to ignore. Employees throughout the company whispered her name in hallways, speculating how an intern had managed to stand her ground in a room full of seasoned executives. But not everyone was impressed. Tension simmered quietly among a few long-tenured staff members who felt their years of loyalty and service had been overlooked. If she noticed the disapproving glances or overheard the whispered criticisms, Elisa didn't show it. She kept her head down and focused on her work. But the storm brewing around her was only beginning to unfold. One afternoon, as she reviewed a set of critical documents in her small office space, a knock on the door startled her. Standing there was Ethan's executive assistant, a polished woman named Sylvia who always carried herself with an air of cool authority. Ms. Martin, Sylvia said smoothly, Mr. Pfizer would like you to join him in the conference room. Elisa looked up in surprise. What's this about? Sylvia raised an eyebrow. You'll find out soon enough. Heart pounding, Elisa followed Sylvia down the corridor. Employees they passed stopped talking, their curious eyes trailing after her as if she were walking into a trial. When they reached the conference room, Sylvia opened the door, revealing a group of senior managers seated around the long table. Ethan stood at the head, his expression unreadable. Come in, Ethan said, gesturing to an empty chair near him. Elisa hesitated, but she stepped inside and took her seat. The room felt charged, the tension so thick she could almost touch it. One of the senior managers, a stern-looking man named Harold Reed, leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. So, this is the rising star, Harold said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Elisa glanced at Ethan, who gave a subtle nod, as if silently urging her to remain calm. She straightened her shoulders and met Harold's gaze. I'm just doing my best to contribute, she said simply. Harold smirked. Your best, huh? It must be quite something, considering the recent talk about shifting responsibilities in the project analysis department. Some of us have been here a long time. Ms. Martin, we've seen people come and go, but I've never seen an intern walk in and suddenly become the CEO's favorite. Ethan's expression tightened, but he said nothing. I'm not trying to take anyone's place, Elisa replied evenly. I'm here to learn and support the team. Harold leaned forward. Support the team? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been climbing the ladder faster than anyone else. Without the years of experience to back it up, Elisa could feel her face heat up, but she kept her voice steady. I understand that experience is important. I respect the work that's been done here long before I arrived. I'm just trying to bring fresh ideas and do the job I've been given." Another manager, a woman named Claire, spoke up. "That's all well and good. But you can't expect everyone to be thrilled when someone new comes in and gets opportunities we've been waiting years for. It's not personal, but there's a process, Ms. Martin, a hierarchy, and it feels like you're bypassing it." Elisa glanced at Ethan again, wondering if he would step in. He remained silent, his sharp eyes scanning the room. But he didn't speak. She realized he wanted her to handle this on her own. "I'm not trying to bypass anything," Elisa said. "I know I have a lot to learn, and I'm grateful for the guidance I've received. If there's something I can do differently to earn your trust and support, I'm open to it." Harold shook his head. "That's not the point. The point is that this isn't how things are supposed to work." "Enough." Ethan's voice cut through the room like a blade. All eyes turned to him. He stood tall, his expression as cold and controlled as ever. "I appreciate everyone's concerns," Ethan said, his voice low and measured. "But let me make one thing clear. Ms. Martin is here because she's proven her worth. She's taken on challenging tasks and delivered results. I made the decision to involve her in these projects because I saw potential that benefits this company." He looked around the table, his gaze settling on Harold. "Experience is valuable, but so is recognizing new talent and giving it room to grow. I don't expect everyone to agree, but I do expect everyone to act professionally and respectfully. We're on the same team. Let's not forget that." A heavy silence hung in the air. Harold didn't say another word, but his expression remained stony. Claire shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while a few other managers exchanged uneasy glances. Elisa felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Ethan had defended her, but she knew this wouldn't be the end of the tension. Still, she wasn't about to let it show. "Thank you, Mr. Pfizer," she said quietly, but confidently. Ethan nodded once, then returned his attention to the group. "Let's move on to the project updates." For the rest of the meeting, Elisa stayed focused on the discussion. She answered questions when asked and contributed her insights where appropriate. By the time the meeting ended, she felt like she had survived a battlefield. Harold and a few others left the room without a glance in her direction. But Claire stopped by her chair as the others filed out. "For what it's worth," Claire said in a low voice, "you handled that well. Just keep in mind that not everyone adapts to change easily." Elisa nodded. "Thank you. I'll keep that in mind." Claire gave her a small, tight smile before leaving. When the room was empty except for her and Ethan, she finally let out a shaky breath. "You did well," Ethan said simply. She looked up at him, searching his expression. "Did you know that was going to happen?" He shrugged slightly. "I had a feeling, but it was important for you to handle it." "Important?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "I felt like I was on trial." Ethan leaned against the table and looked at her intently. "Because you were. They needed to see how you would respond under pressure. And you showed them you're more than capable." Elisa shook her head. "Is it always going to be like this?" "Not always," he said, "but you've chosen to stand out. And that means people will have opinions. Some will support you, and some won't. That's just how it works. The question is, how will you handle it?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll handle it by continuing to do my job and proving them wrong." Ethan's lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile. "Good answer." As she walked out of the conference room, Elisa realized that the storm around her might not pass anytime soon. But she also knew that she wasn't the same person who had nervously stumbled into the elevator on her first day. She was stronger now, and no matter how much the wind howled, she was determined to keep moving forward. Session 7, The Fallout. After the confrontation in the conference room, Elisa found herself walking a fine line. Ethan's words had silenced the doubters for the moment, but the tension in the air hadn't dissipated. People still whispered behind her back, though the volume had dropped to a murmur. She thought she'd feel more confident after standing her ground. But the truth was, every step in the office now felt like walking on thin ice. Ethan, meanwhile, had returned to his usual demeanor. At least, that's what she told herself. But she couldn't help noticing subtle changes. He asked for her input more frequently, his tone softer when addressing her in meetings. A few times, she caught him watching her as if gauging her reaction before delivering one of his sharp critiques. While he remained the same hard-nosed CEO to most of the office, there was an undeniable shift in how he treated her. At first, she chalked it up to gratitude for handling the meeting well. After all, Ethan had taken a risk by defending her, and she'd managed to validate his trust. But the more it happened, the harder it became to ignore. She was still the same slightly klutzy intern who spilled coffee on important reports. She still got nervous before every presentation and triple-checked her work for fear of making a mistake. Yet, Ethan seemed to see something different in her, something she wasn't sure she saw in herself. Late one evening, long after most employees had gone home, Elisa remained at her desk. A massive spreadsheet loomed on her computer screen, the numbers blurring together as fatigue set in. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples, wondering if she'd ever get used to the demands of the job. Her phone buzzed on the desk, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from Ethan. "Still in the office?" She stared at the text for a moment before replying. "Yeah, just trying to finish this analysis." "Why?" The response came almost immediately. "Come by my office when you're done." Elisa frowned. What now? She stretched her arms, saved her work, and hesitated before heading upstairs. By the time she reached Ethan's office, the lights were dim, and the city skyline glowed in the background. He was sitting at his desk, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up. The sight of him like this, relaxed yet still commanding, made her pulse quicken in a way she didn't fully understand. "You needed something?" she asked, stepping inside and closing the door. Ethan looked up from the file in front of him. "Yes, have a seat." She sat down, her curiosity growing. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I wanted to discuss your long-term role here." Her stomach did a nervous flip. "My role?" He nodded. "You've proven yourself capable. More than capable, actually. The way you handled the department's concerns, most interns wouldn't have lasted through that meeting." "I had no choice," she replied. "If I backed down, it would have been the end of me." He smiled faintly. "Exactly. That's why I think it's time we formalized your position here." Her mouth fell open slightly. "You mean, a permanent position?" "That's right," he said. "You've earned it." She blinked, taken aback. A full-time position? It was what she'd been working toward all along. But hearing him say it made it real. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan said, his voice lighter than she expected. "Yes," she said quickly, earning a rare chuckle from him. But her excitement was short-lived as a wave of doubt crept in. "What about the others?" she asked. "They're not exactly thrilled with me right now." "They'll adapt," Ethan replied firmly. "People respect results. If you continue to deliver, the opinions of a few disgruntled employees won't matter." She nodded slowly, trying to absorb it all. But then another thought struck her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why now?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "Because I need someone I can trust. Someone who's willing to challenge me when I'm wrong, but who can also execute the plan when it's right. You've shown you can do that." Her cheeks flushed. It was the most direct praise she'd ever received from him, and it left her feeling both proud and exposed. "I won't let you down," she said quietly. "I know," Ethan replied. "Now, go home. It's late." She stood and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. "And Elisa?" he said. She looked back, and his expression softened just slightly. "You're doing great." She walked out of the office with her heart racing and her mind buzzing. As the elevator carried her back down to the main floor, she thought about what this promotion meant. It wasn't just a job. It was validation that she belonged here, that she could hold her own in a world that had seemed so intimidating when she first stepped through the doors of Dax Corp. But more than that, it was a sign that Ethan believed in her, and that, for reasons she couldn't quite name, mattered most of all. The next morning, Elisa's announcement was met with mixed reactions. A few colleagues congratulated her sincerely, while others offered lukewarm smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Harold, unsurprisingly, said nothing, though his disapproving glare spoke volumes. Claire, however, surprised her with a quiet word of encouragement. "Congratulations," Claire said, pulling Elisa aside. "I know not everyone's happy about it, but you earned this." "Thanks," Elisa said, feeling a bit more steady. "That means a lot." Claire smiled. "Just keep your head up. If you keep proving them wrong, they'll come around." Elisa nodded, grateful for the support, but as the day went on, she couldn't shake the feeling that the tension in the office hadn't eased. If anything, it had grown heavier, as if the storm clouds were still gathering. In the weeks that followed, she threw herself into her new responsibilities, determined to show everyone, herself included, that she deserved the promotion. She worked late hours, delivered reports ahead of schedule, and even volunteered for extra projects. The work was exhausting, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. And every so often, she'd catch Ethan watching her during meetings, his expression unreadable but focused. It was as if he were waiting for something, testing her. She couldn't help but wonder if she was passing his test, or if she was being set up for an even bigger challenge. The whispers in the office continued, but Elisa refused to let them distract her. She knew that no matter how much she achieved, some people would never be satisfied. The only thing she could do was keep pushing forward. Storm or no storm. Session 8. Fractured Alliances. Elisa knew the storm she had been trying to outrun was finally upon her. The promotion that had once seemed like a victory now felt like a spotlight. And not the kind she wanted. It cast a harsh glare on everything, her relationships with her colleagues, the whispers that followed her through the hallways, and the increasingly complicated dynamic with Ethan. Despite her growing list of accomplishments, she felt like she was on trial every day, her every move scrutinized and judged by her peers. The tension with Harold reached a breaking point one afternoon when the two were assigned to collaborate on a time-sensitive project. The moment they sat down in the conference room, Harold's frustration boiled over. "Look, Elisa," he said, leaning back in his chair with a scowl. "Let's not pretend this partnership is something either of us wanted. You may have charmed Ethan into giving you that promotion, but you're still out of your depth here." Elisa bristled. "I earned this promotion, Harold, and if you'd stop glaring at me long enough to actually look at my work, you'd see that." "Earned it?" Harold scoffed. "You're an intern who's barely been here long enough to find the supply closet. The rest of us have been putting in years of work, and suddenly you're the one we have to answer to? I don't think so." Elisa gritted her teeth, determined not to let him rattle her. "Fine, let's just focus on the project. This isn't about me or you. It's about getting the work done." But Harold didn't back down. Instead, he doubled down, nitpicking every detail she suggested, rejecting her ideas outright, and rolling his eyes at her every comment. By the time the meeting ended, Elisa was exhausted, not from the work, but from the constant battle to hold her ground. Outside the conference room, Claire was waiting. She raised an eyebrow as Elisa walked by. "That bad?" "Worse," Elisa admitted, rubbing her temples. "I'm trying, Claire, I really am, but no matter what I do, it's like he's already decided I'm a fraud." Claire sighed. "He's just bitter. Don't let him drag you down." Elisa nodded, though her confidence was fading. It was one thing to push through when it felt like Ethan had her back. But lately even that certainty was slipping. He had been distant in recent weeks, his normally attentive demeanor replaced by something colder, more reserved. Elisa couldn't shake the feeling that their once solid rapport was starting to crumble. It all came to a head during a high-stakes presentation with a prospective client. Ethan had asked Elisa to prepare a comprehensive report on the company's new strategic initiatives. And she had worked tirelessly for days, refining every detail. But when the meeting began, Ethan barely glanced at her. He delivered the opening remarks, introduced the team, and then skipped right over Elisa's name as he outlined the agenda. She sat there, frozen, waiting for him to hand the floor over to her. Instead, he kept talking, walking through the very material she had prepared. As Ethan went slide by slide through her presentation, Elisa's stomach sank. He wasn't just presenting her work, he was presenting it as if it were his own. No credit, no acknowledgement, no indication that she had been the one to spend countless late nights assembling the data, crafting the arguments, and polishing the delivery. By the time the presentation ended, Elisa felt like a ghost at the table. No one had even looked her way. After the meeting, Elisa cornered Ethan in the hallway. "What was that?" she demanded, her voice low but trembling with anger. Ethan looked at her with a carefully neutral expression. "What was what?" "You know what I'm talking about," she said, crossing her arms. "That presentation was my work. I spent hours on it. Days. And you didn't even mention my name." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Elisa, I needed to ensure the message came across clearly and concisely. The client needed to hear it from me. That's not an excuse," she shot back. "You could have at least acknowledged me, given me credit, but instead, you acted like I wasn't even there." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't mean to undermine you." "Then why do I feel so undermined?" Elisa asked. "I thought you trusted me. I thought," She stopped herself before saying too much. I thought I'd earned my place at the table. But today, you made it clear I haven't. For a moment, Ethan looked like he was going to argue. But then his expression softened. I should have handled that better. You're right. The admission caught her off guard. What? You're right, he repeated. I should have given you credit. I didn't think about how it would come across. And that's on me. Elisa stared at him, unsure whether to feel vindicated or even more frustrated. So what now? You just expect me to let it go? I'm not asking you to let it go, Ethan said quietly. I'm asking for a chance to fix it. She studied him for a long moment before nodding. Fine, but this can't happen again. It won't, he said firmly. You have my word. Still, the damage was done. Even though Ethan's apology helped smooth over the immediate conflict, it didn't erase the lingering doubts in Elisa's mind. She returned to her desk feeling raw and uncertain. How was she supposed to navigate the politics of the office, the resentment of her colleagues, and now the inconsistency of Ethan's support? As the weeks passed, the uneasy truce between her and Ethan remained, but their once easy camaraderie was gone. Every interaction felt carefully measured, as if both of them were afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. Elisa threw herself into her work, determined to prove her worth again, not to Harold, not to her other colleagues, but to herself. Yet no matter how much she accomplished, it never seemed like enough. One night, long after the office had emptied, Elisa found herself staring out the window of the break room. The city lights twinkled below, a sprawling sea of possibility. But her reflection in the glass was a reminder of the mounting pressure she felt. She had fought so hard to get here, to earn her place in a world she once thought was out of reach. But now that she was here, she wasn't sure she belonged. And for the first time, she wondered if she ever would. Behind her, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. She turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, a cup of coffee in hand. His expression was unreadable, but there was something softer in his eyes than there had been in weeks. Can't sleep either? He asked. Something like that, Elisa replied, her voice quieter than usual. He walked over and leaned against the counter, glancing out the window with her. You've been doing good work. You know, he said after a moment. Even if I haven't always shown it. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she studied his reflection in the glass, trying to read the meaning behind his words. Finally, she asked, why now? Because you deserve to know, Ethan said simply. And because I don't want to lose the person who's been holding this place together. Elisa felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly tempered by the reality of the situation. It's not just about the work, Ethan, it's about the trust. If you don't trust me, what's the point? I do trust you, he said firmly, and I'm going to prove it. This time, she turned to look at him directly. How? You'll see, he said, a hint of determination in his voice. Then, after a pause, he added, but you have to trust me too. Elisa studied him for a moment longer before nodding. Okay. As Ethan walked away, she felt a small weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't a complete fix, and it didn't erase the weeks of doubt and frustration, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. Session 9. A question of loyalty. Elisa's mind raced as she walked into the office the next morning. The tension that had been simmering under the surface for weeks felt more suffocating than ever. Despite Ethan's recent attempts to mend fences, the workplace atmosphere had only grown more complicated. The whispers about her promotion, the sudden attention from Logan Pierce, and her own doubts about Ethan's intentions all tangled together into a mess she could no longer ignore. By now, it was clear that Logan's interest in her wasn't entirely professional. His casual comments and frequent check-ins had started to feel more personal. And the fact that he had a history of clashing with Ethan only made it more confusing. If he was trying to win her trust, or lure her into some kind of leverage against Ethan, he was certainly persistent. Morning, Elisa. Logan greeted her as she stepped out of the elevator. His voice was light and easy, but his eyes were sharp, always analyzing. Morning, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. Logan fell into step beside her, his smile unwavering. I was wondering if you had time to grab a coffee today. There's something I'd like to run by you. Elisa hesitated. She had avoided spending too much time with Logan outside of work discussions, worried about what Ethan might think. But the nagging feeling that she needed answers overpowered her caution. Sure, she said at last. When would you like to meet? Lunch break? I know a great cafe just around the corner. Fine, I'll meet you there. As Logan walked away, Elisa caught a glimpse of Ethan down the hall. He was speaking to a group of executives. His expression as commanding as ever. When his eyes met hers, he paused briefly, his gaze unreadable. Elisa forced herself to keep walking, but she could feel the weight of his stare long after she had turned the corner. At the cafe, Logan was already seated at a corner table when Elisa arrived. He had a cappuccino in front of him and was scrolling through something on his tablet. He looked up and smiled as she approached. Glad you could make it. Elisa sat down and folded her hands on the table. What's this about, Logan? Always straight to the point, he said with a chuckle. I like that about you. Elisa raised an eyebrow. If this is just a compliment session, I'm going back to the office. Relax, Logan said, setting down his tablet. I wanted to talk about your future here. My future? Yes, he said, leaning forward slightly. You've made quite a name for yourself in a short amount of time. Not many people can handle the kind of pressure you've been under. Let alone come out looking as capable as you have. She frowned. What exactly are you getting at? I'm saying you have options, Logan said, his tone serious. You don't have to limit yourself to one path. Dax Corp isn't the only company that would recognize your potential. Elisa felt a pang of discomfort. You're offering me a job. Logan smiled faintly. I'm offering you a choice. You've already proven you're more than just an intern. You're smart, resourceful, and you know how to adapt. But here's the thing, Elisa. Staying in one place too long, especially under the kind of scrutiny you're dealing with, isn't always the best move. Are you saying I should quit? She asked, her voice low. Not necessarily, Logan replied, but I am saying that loyalty isn't always rewarded. You should think about what's best for you. Elisa stared at him, unsure of what to say. She hadn't expected Logan to be so direct, and it unnerved her. I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice steady. Take your time, Logan said, just know that you have options. Back at the office, Elisa couldn't shake the conversation from her mind. The idea of leaving Dax Corp had never occurred to her before. But Logan's words lingered like a shadow, making her question everything. Did Ethan really value her contributions? Or was she just another piece on his chessboard? And if Logan was right, if loyalty wouldn't be rewarded, then what was the point of staying? By the time she walked into Ethan's office later that afternoon, her emotions were swirling. He glanced up from his desk as she entered, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in his expression, concern, maybe, or curiosity. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual composed demeanor. You wanted to see me? She asked, trying to sound neutral. Ethan nodded. I need your input on a proposal we're reviewing. The finance department's projections don't add up, and I need a fresh perspective. Elisa took the seat across from him, the conversation with Logan still echoing in her mind. As Ethan explained the details of the proposal, she nodded along, making notes and offering suggestions. But her thoughts kept drifting, and Ethan must have noticed. Is something on your mind? He asked, his tone gentler than usual. Elisa hesitated, debating whether to tell him the truth. Finally, she said, Logan Pierce offered me a job. Ethan's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. When? Earlier today, we met for coffee, and he told me I should consider other options. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. What did you say? I told him I'd think about it, Elisa admitted, but I don't know what to think. I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel. For a moment, Ethan was silent, his hands clasped in front of him. Then he said, Logan has always been good at planting seeds of doubt. He's not just offering you a job, Elisa. He's trying to undermine you and me. Why would he do that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because he thrives on chaos, Ethan replied. If he can cause division within this company, he gains leverage, and if he can pull you away from here, he weakens my team. Elisa frowned. I don't understand why he thinks I'm so important. You've proven yourself, Ethan said simply. You've earned a reputation for being dependable and innovative. Logan sees that, and he wants to use it to his advantage. But why didn't you tell me any of this before? She asked, frustration creeping into her voice. You knew he was trying to cause trouble, and you didn't say anything. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. I didn't think it would get this far. I thought you'd see through him on your own. Well, maybe I would have, if you'd been honest with me from the start, Elisa snapped. Instead, You left me to figure it out on my own. Because I trust you, Ethan said quietly. I trust you to make the right decision. Elisa stared at him, her anger softening into confusion. Do you really? Ethan met her gaze. Yes. And I hope you'll trust me when I say that Logan Pierce is not the kind of person you want to align yourself with. For the first time in weeks, Elisa felt a flicker of clarity. She still didn't have all the answers. But she knew one thing. She had to trust herself. If Logan was trying to manipulate her, she wouldn't let him. And if Ethan genuinely valued her, it was time for him to prove it. Okay, she said finally. I'll stay. But I need to know you're on my side. Ethan, I am, he said, his voice firm. Always. As she left his office, Elisa felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was determined to navigate it on her own terms. And if Ethan truly meant what he said, maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to work together again, without the shadows of doubt clouding their every step. Session 10. Taking the leap. The morning air was sharp and brisk, and the soft glow of the rising sun painted the skyscrapers in muted gold. Elisa walked into the office with a sense of quiet determination, her mind still racing from the decision she'd made the night before. For weeks, she had danced on the edge of uncertainty, torn between loyalty and doubt, between staying at Dax Corp and walking away from it all. But after a long, sleepless night spent thinking about Ethan's words, she had finally chosen her path. I'm ready, she whispered to herself as she stepped out of the elevator and onto the executive floor. The office was quiet at this early hour, with only a handful of employees scattered about. Elisa walked purposefully down the corridor to Ethan's office, each step bringing her closer to a conversation she had never imagined herself having. When she reached the large glass door, she hesitated for just a moment, then raised her hand and knocked. Come in, Ethan's deep voice called out from the other side. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, finding him seated behind his desk, already immersed in a stack of reports. He glanced up, his expression shifting from concentration to curiosity. Elisa, you're here early. I needed to speak with you, she said, closing the door behind her. Ethan set his papers aside and leaned back slightly, his piercing gaze fixed on her. What's on your mind? Elisa took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. I thought about what you said yesterday. About trust, about making my own decisions. He didn't respond right away, giving her the space to continue. I've decided to stay, she said, her voice steady. But if I'm going to stay, I need more clarity. I can't keep second-guessing what's going on around me. I need to know where I stand. Ethan's eyes softened, though his expression remained serious. I understand, he said quietly, and I appreciate you telling me. I'm not doing this to earn anyone's approval. She added, I'm staying because I believe I can make a difference here. But I need to be certain that this isn't just a game to you. Ethan sat forward, resting his hands on the desk. Elisa, I'll be honest. There are times when I've been guarded. Not just with you, but with everyone. It's how I've run things for years. But I see now that it's not enough. If I want you to trust me, I have to show you that I trust you in return. She felt her shoulders relax slightly, though her resolve didn't waver. That's all I've wanted, she said softly. Honesty. Ethan nodded. Then let's start fresh. No more half-truths. No more guessing. I'll keep you in the loop on what's happening at this company. You'll have the information you need to make the right calls. Agreed? Agreed. A small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth. It wasn't the confident smirk she had grown accustomed to. This was something else, something warmer. Thank you, she said, meeting his eyes. I won't let you down. I know you won't, he replied. As she turned to leave, Ethan called her name. She paused, looking back at him. Welcome back, he said simply. In the weeks that followed, Elisa felt a renewed sense of purpose. The whispers around the office didn't disappear entirely, but they faded into the background as she threw herself into her work. Ethan stayed true to his word, keeping her informed and involving her in decisions that mattered. For the first time, she felt like an integral part of the team rather than an outsider struggling to prove herself. But not everything came easily. Challenges emerged, tight deadlines, complex projects, and the occasional conflict with other departments. Through it all, Elisa held her ground, drawing on the strength she had built during her time at Dax Corp. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she was capable of finding them. Ethan, too, seemed to change. He was still the same sharp, driven CEO, but there was a new openness to him. When they worked together, she noticed how he listened more, how he sought her opinion rather than simply issuing commands. Their interactions were no longer tinged with tension or suspicion. Instead, they were marked by mutual respect, and something else that Elisa couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't just the professional side of their relationship that shifted. On rare occasions, they would share quiet moments outside of work, short conversations over coffee, brief exchanges of humor that lightened the mood. It was as if the barriers that had once separated them were slowly dissolving. Elisa found herself looking forward to those moments, though she reminded herself to keep her focus on the job. After all, she wasn't here to chase after anything more than her career goals. Or so she told herself. One evening, as Elisa was finishing up a report in the empty office, Ethan walked in. He didn't have his usual stack of documents or his ever-present tablet. Instead, he carried 2 coffee cups, one of which he set on her desk without a word. She looked up in surprise. "What's this?" "Coffee," he said with a shrug. "You've been working late. I thought you might need it." Elisa blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you." Ethan took a seat in the chair across from her, sipping his own coffee as if it were the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the hum of the office's HVAC system the only sound around them. "I wanted to thank you," Ethan said after a while, breaking the quiet, "not just for staying, but for everything you've brought to this company." Elisa raised an eyebrow. "Everything? You've made me see things differently," he admitted. "You've challenged me in ways no one else has. And I think we're better for it." She felt a warmth rise in her chest. "That's very kind of you to say." "It's the truth," he said simply. Elisa looked down at her coffee cup, hiding a small smile. "Well, you've definitely kept me on my toes. I'm not sure I would have made it this far without learning how to handle all the curveballs you've thrown my way." Ethan chuckled softly. "Fair enough." For a moment, it felt like the world outside the office didn't exist. It was just the two of them, sharing a quiet moment over coffee. The unspoken understanding between them deeper than words. "Ethan," Elisa said hesitantly, "I don't know where all of this will lead. I don't know if I'll always be at Dax Corp or if I'll find myself somewhere else down the line. But for now, I'm glad I stayed." He met her gaze, his expression serious but warm. "So am I." As the night wore on, the two of them continued to talk, about work, about life, and about the things they had learned from each other. It wasn't a grand, dramatic moment. It was quiet, simple, and genuine, and for Elisa, that made all the difference. A new beginning. As the seasons change, so did everything else. The once unlikely pair of Elisa Martin and Ethan Pfizer stood at a new crossroads. What had started as an internship full of mishaps and misunderstandings had transformed into a journey of growth, trust, and connection. The clumsy intern who tripped her way into the CEO's elevator now shared a bond with him that no one in the office could deny. Elisa found herself reflecting on all that had happened. Every challenge, every misstep, and every awkward moment had led her to this point. The rumors, the awkward dinner, the quiet conversations, they all seemed so distant now. Instead of feeling like an outsider, she now felt like someone whose voice mattered, whose ideas were heard. And Ethan? He wasn't the same distant, aloof CEO he had been. He had softened in ways no one, least of all Elisa, could have predicted. He had learned to let someone in, to trust, and to see the value in more than just numbers and results. It wasn't an easy transformation, but it was one he welcomed. Elisa had shown him that there was more to leadership than control. There was also understanding, vulnerability, and connection. Their partnership wasn't perfect. They still argued over projects and disagreed on strategies. But those disagreements now came with mutual respect and a shared determination to make things work. They had learned that the most important part of any relationship, whether professional or personal, was the willingness to show up, to listen, and to try. As they walked out of the office together one evening, the city lights twinkled above them. The journey that had once felt like a series of stumbles now felt steady, purposeful. They weren't just colleagues anymore. They weren't just two people who had survived a whirlwind of office rumors and corporate drama. They were something more. Neither of them knew exactly where their path would lead, but they both knew one thing: they were better together. And for now, that was enough. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Millionaire Love Stories. Have love and resilience ever changed your life? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Subscribe for more stories of love, transformation, and the power of connection. Together, let's believe in the magic of love.